Now, the Buckeye Extra Podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Bill Rabinowitz and Rob Oller. It's Labor Day, September 2nd, and we are talking about Ohio State's win over the weekend, a 52-6 rout of Akron. The Buckeyes get started on the right foot. Certainly, it maybe wasn't really the point barrage in the first half, but things eventually picked up for Ohio State in week one and made pretty quick and easy work of the Akron Zips.
Yeah, it was funny. I think Ohio State fans and probably the players, the team, thought they would just rout Akron from the start, that they would just come in and establish their superiority and just roll. Didn't happen that way. It was 10-3 late in the second quarter before Ohio State scored with maybe 4.5 minutes to go in the first half. And then the second half, they did obviously take over. I think the key takeaways were, coming into the season, what were our questions? Quarterback and offensive line. And I thought Will Howard played quite well. And I thought the offensive line was still shaky.
Yeah, I think Will Howard showed that he's capable. I mean, he didn't bomb. I thought he had some nice throws, especially to Jeremiah Smith there, that quick cross route in the end zone for the TD. That was a nice throw. And he had one brain fart where he threw backward, sort of in desperation. I think it was Trevion Henderson.
Yeah.
It was a fumble. It was not a forward pass. We all thought it was a forward pass, and on a replay confirmed it was a fumble. Ryan Day actually called that out in the post-game presser. He wasn't happy with that. I think Bill and I talked after the game, maybe it was Joey, that I didn't think Day was especially effusive of Will Howard, but he's tough on quarterbacks. He's never really, until he's all in with you, he holds back a little bit. But I thought Will Howard was fine. He showed he's got some running ability. And I think if you're an Ohio State fan, yeah, the offensive line was a little shaky, although it was the first time they had not given up a sack since 2022, I guess. And but you got to be happy with the takeaways. I'm sure we'll get into that. The defense, that to me is the highlight. The defense was supposed to be the strength of the team, and it made some big plays and really, showed what they have. Now, again, it was Akron, and Akron was worn down at that point, but good performance by the defense, and they're going to need that all season. They're going to have to ride that defense.
To me, the most memorable thing I think that people will probably come away with this game thinking about was Jeremiah Smith's introduction, and we heard about him throughout the offseason, how good he was going to be and how much hype there was around him. It got to the point where it felt like in the last month or so, Ryan Day was doing his best to temper expectations for him, and they went to him right away. That tunnel screen they threw to him was well drawn up, and if he catches it, that very well may go for a touchdown. And then on the next series, Will Howard goes right back to him, catches 3 balls on the second drive, ends up going into the end zone on a fade route for a 16-yard touchdown pass reception to get his day going, finishes with 2 touchdowns. And, it's a big reason why we didn't spend a lot of time on this podcast or in print or online discussing, how are they going to replace Marvin Harrison Jr. I think it was in some ways expected that this freshman would come in and really help shoulder the load. And he did more than that from the start. I think he really announced his arrival in a big way Saturday.
Yeah, we knew about Jeremiah Smith. We'd seen enough of it. We don't see a lot of the practices, but we saw enough to know that he was special. And he's the first, we tried to do the research, and to the best of our knowledge, he's the first freshman receiver to start his first career game. There are others who have started as freshmen, but not their first career game. And, amazing that when you think about the players they've had that have never done it. Well, that's how special Jeremiah Smith is. And it shouldn't get lost in the shuffle that Emeka Egbuka and Cardell Tate are pretty good themselves. And we saw Brandon Inniss as a kick returner, as a punt returner, can be quite the weapon as well. So I don't think there's any shortage of talent at that position.
I thought what really got my attention was how much Will Howard seemed to trust Jeremiah Smith, because after that early drop, maybe you're more hesitant to go his way. Well, the very next series, it's 3rd and 10. And he connects with Jeremiah Smith on that curl route. That I think it was a testament to the belief that he had that he was going to really turn the page from that early blip on the first drive. Just goes back to him right there in a situation where you obviously need to complete that pass to move the sticks, and they did that right there. So the trust is there. I mean, we kind of knew that because the way Will Howard, the way the other receivers, and even the defensive backs talked about Jeremiah Smith, but you're waiting to see how it unfolds in a live situation, and I think it unfolded quite nicely for Ohio State.
Yeah, the run game. Moving on to that, I thought Henderson looked pretty good. He kind of looked who he is. He didn't look any different really than who he's been last year, especially. Judkins looked okay, and maybe that was more the line. He didn't blow me away. Let's put it that way. I kind of was maybe led to believe, or in my mind, the expectation was he was going to be this incredible talent, and maybe he will be, but he didn't look incredible given the circumstances, I thought. Again, Akron's D-line was the strength of their team. I don't know how good it is, but that was supposedly the strength of their team, so maybe that factors into it.
And he got stuffed on his first 3 carries, and there was nowhere to go. So I'm sure he's thinking, wait a minute, I left Ole Miss for this. but you could see the talent later in the game. He had a couple of nice runs, but we should point out the offensive line was without its best player. Donovan Jackson didn't play left guard. Austin Servell played first career start, really first meaningful action he'd ever really seen. And you had Tager Shabola at right guard, new also Seth McLaughlin, who played obviously at Alabama, but was new to the Buckeyes. So you had the interior of the offensive line playing together in a game for the first time. And honestly, I'm not sure how much they played together, the 3 of them, in practice together. We don't really know that, but there were a couple plays. I did the DVR review last night. There were a couple plays. One that was just like a disaster where they just missed blocks, didn't block guys. And you're like, oh boy, that was, they're going to spend a lot of time on that one in film session. And that's to be expected with first games as well. You always like to think a team as talented as Ohio State could just kind of not be hit by that kind of stuff. But it's the first game, and I don't care how many times you practiced, how hard you practice, when you're playing a different team, a different opponent in a stadium with 100,000 people, it's going to be different.
I do understand the feeling that a lot of Ohio State fans had coming out of that game where they just felt maybe underwhelmed by the offensive line in terms of its run blocking. You're playing Akron with a lot of returning starters. Even with Donovan Jackson out, you still have guys with starting experience there between both of your tackles. Seth McLaughlin started at Alabama. So you have still, I think, a veteran offensive line. And I think with the arrival of Chip Kelly, that maybe you want to see some more signs of just more of a smash mouth-esque football team. And that really wasn't their game, their style. Maybe that's never going to be Ohio State style, but I think people left wanting to see a little more from the offensive line. I do think the offensive line was better when we last saw them in the Cotton Bowl, where Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz were under frequent duress, and they gave up 4 sacks in that game. As Rob mentioned at the top, this was the first time in 2 years Ohio State went without giving up a sack in a game, and Will Howard really was not pressured all that much, had a pretty clean pocket. But in terms of just the way they were able to move the line of scrimmage, I don't think you could say they were really overpowering in any respect there. But it's early, and we'll just see how things unfold, I guess. I'm a wait-and-see mode, I guess, with that group a little bit still.
We thought we'd see, with Chip Kelly running the offense, a lot of new wrinkles, things that were obvious from even the press box. We really didn't. Now, I think a lot of that is that you don't want to show everything against Akron. I mean, I think he's holding stuff back. And first game, I think he kind of treated this in a way like a preseason game in the NFL, in the sense that let's just see what we've got. Let's not get cute with play calls. We're not going to scheme to, this huge extent. I mean, obviously they schemed, but I think they just wanted to see how do we just kind of look just in a basic scheme. And they'll add the other stuff later. You don't want to show your hand the first game against a team like Akron, and they didn't. But I kind of thought I'd see some plays that I'd be able to recognize in the press box, oh, that's a Chip Kelly thing. And I really didn't.
Yeah, it was pretty seamless between Ryan Day, play caller, and Chip Kelly, play caller. It didn't look a whole lot different. Maybe that's the idea. Right. I didn't want it to look completely different. But, I think we probably need to hold off on the Chip Kelly offensive guru thing. I mean, we probably got a little carried away with that, what the expectation is. We shall see. I'm just saying in general, if people thought, Chip Kelly, they were going to see this wild, wide open, original offense. And I think so that expectation was there. So really what you're saying, Bill, is it was kind of what was like, well, this didn't look a whole lot different than last year. I'm really curious looking ahead to this week, because I know we'll get to that with Western Michigan, gave Wisconsin a game. And Ryan Day, everyone's talking about the slow start. Well, part of that's because Ryan Day's talked about the slow start. I know there was a lot of pushback. I wrote something about how, another slow start, and people were, oh, it went 52 to 6. What's the problem? Well, I'm just going off what the head coach says, which is that bothered him. Now, he said it was nerves, first time jitters, fine, but it's been a trend, at least last year. So, Western Michigan is a perfect opportunity to break that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Rob, to your point about the Chip Kelly effect on this team, he did not come here with the goal in mind, and when Ohio State hired him, to reinvent their offense by any means. I mean, Ryan Day is from the Chip Kelly tree. Their offenses have been similar. It was, I think, to enhance certain things, and certainly in the running game, but it was not a reinvention or reimagination of their offense. They're a lot of the same tenets that they do in the pass game and all that are still hold true. So I think that's important to keep in mind. They did not bring in Chip Kelly to change things dramatically or run the blur offense, but certainly they wanted things to be a little maybe better in certain areas and enhance things. I thought there were some times when it looked like they did have some Chip Kelly stuff. The way they ran Will Howard on one of those short yardage situations, there was a quarterback sneak. Maybe Ryan Day would have done that anyway with a more mobile quarterback, but I thought that was at least a little bit of a wrinkle, at least tailored things to your personnel.
Yeah, it was a bunch backfield. They were all bunched right there. And yeah,
I watched that USC LSU game last night, and it was startling. USC just relied, well, they have really good receivers. They're very fast, but they relied and threw to their tight ends a lot. I don't know, after watching the film, maybe Bill can speak to this, but by my count, Ohio State attempted one throw to the tight ends out of 30, I don't know if it was 31 or 38 pass attempts total, and it was incomplete. That was a little surprising based on what the last few years have shown us with the talent they've had at that position. Is this a Chip Kelly thing, or is this our tight ends aren't up to snuff thing? Is it just didn't work out in this particular game? We wanted to see what our wide receivers had. So that's something to keep an eye on moving forward, the tight end.
Well, Cade Stover, obviously been the tight end for the last few years. He's been the exception to the rule in terms of being a pass catcher at Ohio State. They've had some guys like Jeremy Ruckert, who's a really good pass catcher. They didn't throw the ball all that much to him. So the fact they threw a lot to the tight end was more a function of being Cade Stover and the quarterback's comfort with him. C.J. Stroud, of course, loved him, and they're now reunited in Houston in the NFL. He was a target for Kyle McCord last year, obviously. But to your point, I think it's right. I mean, the one pass was the Will Kazmarek. It was a low percentage kind of pass, and it didn't click. You'd think that they would throw the ball at some point to G. Scott, who was a former receiver. Jelani Thurman saw a decent amount of action. He's a good receiver. Again, one game. Let's not go crazy with this. It's one game. But the fact is that it was not a big part of the passing game. And the offense scored 38 points against Akron. I mean, that's not great.
Cade Stover was the second leading receiver for Ohio State last year. He was a Mackey Award finalist. I think they were inevitably going to have a drop-off from his production this season, but they need to have some sort of a middle ground between a Mackey Award finalist guy who leads your team, second leading receiver in receptions, to their tight ends being largely non-entities in the pass game, because they were not really targeted. But this is also, I think, just a reflection of the personnel they have at tight end, who are more blocking oriented or just more inexperienced in the case of Jelani Thurman. And then their receivers are deeper last year. I mean, Emeka Egbuka was banged up quite a bit last year. Yes, you had Marvin Harrison Jr., but between Emeka being banged up and Julian Fleming, I think, just being limited at times by what he can do as a pass catcher, they are deeper. They don't have maybe maybe Jeremiah Smith will end up being at a Marvin Harrison Jr. level by October or November, but they have more options at receiver this year between, I think, that their top four of Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka and Brandon Innes and Carnell Tate, Carnell Tate took a curl route for a touchdown. So I think they just have more options at receiver this year for Will Howard than Kyle McCord had.
Yeah, Penn State actually opened up their offense this past week against West Virginia. Looked really good. Julian Fleming didn't have a catch for Penn State.
Yeah, that surprised me. And just back to the last thing I'll say in the tight end, apparently just looking through stories from when he was at Kansas State, is Will Howard loved throwing to the tight end. Yeah. That was like his main target or one of his main targets. So again, keep an eye on it. I think the coaching staff probably will realize, hey, we had one throw to the tight end. We need to pick that up no matter who's playing the position. I mean, these guys aren't stiffs that are, playing tight end. Even G. Scott's shown that he can catch the ball. So, again, 52-6, you nitpick a little bit here because it's Akron. So that's what we're doing. They didn't throw the tight end. Their offensive line was it's okay. The running game was it's okay. Western Michigan is that next step. And what's the cliche, right? You improve most between the first and second game. We shall see.
Should we switch to defense and what we liked, and maybe if there's anything we didn't like?
I don't know what their defense will be harder to nitpick.
Yeah.
Certainly, I guess sometimes Akron with Joe Moorhead, the offensive coordinator, had some wrinkles and they gave up yards, but they kept Akron out of the end zone. Zips had 6 points. It wasn't quite zip on the scoreboard, but it was close to it.
Yeah, we've seen this plenty of times. The opponent first possession of the game goes down the field against Ohio State. You think, what's going on? What's going on? It's just it takes one possession for Ohio State to make the adjustment, and these opponents have had all year to prepare, and of course they're going to find something. And Joe Moorhead, who was the offensive coordinator at Oregon a few years ago when they came into Columbus and whipped the Buckeyes, he knows what he's doing. So, he kind of drew first blood, and then Ohio State said, okay, that's enough, and put the clamps down. I thought the defensive line was really good. I think about every guy on that line made plays. JT Tuimoloau had, a sack and a half. Jack Sawyer didn't, but was in the backfield quite a bit. Tyreek Williams, I think, had at least 7 or 8 tackles. So the defensive line played well. Look, they were without Cody Simon, their leader, the guy who was replacing Tommy Eichenberg, fifth-year guy. Sonny Styles, who, of course, was a safety last year, was the green dot guy calling the plays, kind of running the defense. You had C.J. Hicks, who also got a sack at linebacker. So the Denzel Burke interception was beautiful. He just stole the ball from the wide receiver. And to get 2 scores, that's the defense outscored Akron by itself.
To me, maybe the most revealing thing about the defense was just Lathan Ramson sort of announcing himself and saying, don't forget about me. We've certainly talked a lot about Caleb Downs all offseason, and I think for good reason. He was the best available guy in the transfer portal and is a big upgrade in the secondary and filled that free safety spot for Josh Proctor. But we hadn't seen Lathan since October, since he had that Liz Frank injury, and he looked really good and fast and shooting down into the backfield and had that fumble return for a touchdown. So to me, having him really, it looks like back to full strength to pair with Caleb Downs back there, I think is a good assurance for Ohio State fans as far as the strength of your secondary.
I think Davis Nosen is probably the happiest guy on the field because he got to play. First play of the game, he got originally called for targeting. Replay showed there was really more shoulder than head, and so he got to stay in the game. But you imagine waiting all year to play, and the first play of the game, you get thrown out. And he's a good player. He's a really good player. I think there's always going to be that risk with him because he's so handsy that you're going to get those calls on him. But you love his mentality in terms of he's just a bulldog out there. He wants the challenge. He craves it. He's aggressive. With him and Burke, you're not going to do a whole lot better than that.
Yeah, defense is the team, right? They're offensively very good. They're gifted at the skill positions, but defensively is they're going to make their money, so to speak. I guess you can say they actually are going to make their money. Not anymore. They make their money. They're not going to make their money. They make their money off the defense, and I didn't really hear, I was pretty preoccupied with writing, but Caleb Downs, what kind of game did he have, Joey?
He had the half sack on the one play where I think JT was the one who kind of tripped him up, and then Caleb Downs finished it. I think overall it was fine. I mean, he's the free safety, so he's at times back there not involved as the play, but it was pretty good. I think good start.
It was a pretty quiet game. There was one play, the play that set up the first, I think it was first Akron field goal. It was a 3rd and 28 or something crazy like that. And he had a chance to make the tackle for a very short gain that would have forced them to probably punt. And he missed that tackle. So it ended up being a 10-yard gain, and they did kick a 48-yard field goal, I think. So I'm sure he will look at that and kick himself, but you're going to miss tackles, right? That's football. You're going to miss tackles. I just know that his standard is so high that he's probably upset with himself for that. But there are other plays. He made a couple of plays where he was just very quick to the ball, and you can see that he's a special player. It just wasn't a game where he's going to show. They didn't throw the ball down the middle deep at all, right? I don't think they threw one pass over the middle.
No, it didn't feel like he was going to get challenged as somebody, at least in coverage. If he was going to make plays, he was going to be coming up from deep center field,
right?
To try to make some stuff, because they were not really going to go there.
I was impressed with JT. I mean, I thought JT, I wouldn't say he was a disappointment last year, but I expected a little more flash. But, talking to him preseason, he says he's having more fun this year. He feels more freed up, and it looked like it. I thought he looked like the guy who everyone thought he'd be. And again, it was Akron, but I think he can be a force and needs to be a force.
Yeah, I agree. And him and Sawyer, he and Sawyer are going to be a dominant defensive end group. And then you add Tyleik Williams and then Ty Hamilton, who's overlooked a lot, and the depth. I mean, Caden Curry's the one who made the nice effort play to force the fumble that Lathan Ransom returned for a touchdown. Caden Curry would start on most teams in the country. I don't think there's much question about that. And Kenyatta Jackson's good. Edric Houston, the freshman, the 5-star freshman, it was actually his helmet that deflected that pass that Gabe Powers intercepted for a pick six. He got his hand up, it actually deflected off the helmet, but he was in position to make the play. And so you see the depth on that defensive line. That's going to be the strength of the team. I think the combination of cornerbacks being able to cover their guys for a while will allow the pass rush to get there, and it'll work vice versa.
Yeah, I'm glad Rob mentioned JT, because he kind of felt like in the Lathan Ransom category to me, as far as a guy who's been productive for a lot of years, but just the way last year ended, maybe he gets a little bit overlooked. And JT came in the same time as Jack Sawyer did. They were both 5 stars. And JT ended up starting a little earlier. And so as the Penn State breakout, and then is a little quieter last year, and Jack kind of catches up to him and has the big flash last year. And we'll talk about Jack Sawyer as the captain. So it was a situation where felt like the sort of a don't forget about me kind of performance, because they got 2 bedrocks as far as their defensive ends. And so I think that was another notable performance along with Lathan.
Yeah, and I thought special teams was improved. Again, Brandon Innes made a couple of really good plays on punt return. He went back and caught a ball that if he hadn't retrieved it, might have rolled inside the 10, who knows how far. He ended up making a positive gain out of that. He almost broke was it a kickoff or a punt? I can't remember what it was. Came close to breaking it. I mean, I think he's going to, Brian Day kind of said on his radio show last week, he guaranteed that they were going to finally score a touchdown on a kickoff or punt, which they haven't done in a decade. He's seen Brandon Innes enough to think that I think he's right. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I always assume you're saying that on a punt return more than a kickoff, because a kickoff.
Yeah, well, right. So Innes is the punt returner, right?
So hard. Well, it's so hard to return a kickoff in general.
Right.
Just the way the new rule works, you're so incentivized to fair catch when you're inside your 20. But yeah, he had some pop as a punt returner. I was just impressed also his ability to field the ball.
Right.
Me is Ohio State's issues with punt return last year. There were many, but I mean, 2 big ones is there were times where they just didn't field the ball, where they just let it roll and bounce. So the way guys are being positioned on the field, or their range just being able to get underneath it, was limited. Not even getting to the point where can you be dynamic once you get the ball in your hands. But a lot of times they just couldn't get to the ball. So the one where he was able to field the ball in the 4, there was another one where he got 2 off the bounds. I thought just even before you factor in just the return yards he had, which were a lot, they were the most anybody's had for Ohio State in almost a decade. He had 60 of them. But before he even got to that stage, he was able to get to the ball, which is, I think, important for them.
And Ohio State had a different punter.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be Nick McClarty, the big 6'7" freshman from Australia, who's got a strong leg, but is facing a learning curve a little bit because he just got to Ohio State in June. He was supposed to start. That's what Ryan Day said, sort of the penultimate week of preseason practices. They end up making a late switch, and ends up Joe McGuire, the Australian with a little more experience, ends up getting the start. I don't think that's a depth chart pecking order that is set in stone. Ryan Day said they wanted to get McClarty another crack at kicking the ball in the second half. They didn't get to it, and they probably should have. So I think as things unfold, it'll be interesting to see who ends up largely getting to punt. Although if you're an Ohio State fan, maybe you don't have much interest in seeing anybody punt. They should have a good enough offense so they don't need to do that a whole lot.
That's right. Hey, we'll know tomorrow after Ryan Day's press conference on Tuesday, but injury update. You guys want to jump in on that? The 2 guys that were out, whether they'll be back, and I don't think there was anything major that came out of the Akron game.
No, every time there was an injury, it was an Akron guy. And when they stopped play, it was an Akron guy. Donovan Jackson and Cody Simon went through some warm-ups in uniform. So even then you're thinking, okay, maybe they're going to change their mind and maybe they'll play. They didn't. But the fact that they were moving, I didn't see Jackson that much, but I did see Cody Simon. He seemed to be moving fine. Joey, I don't know if you saw Donovan Jackson more than I did.
They both looked like they could have played. If this was a case where Ohio State was playing Oregon, I would expect those guys would have played, or maybe even just against another Big Ten opponent. I think something to keep in mind with this year, with the anticipation for a longer season, a longer playoff, you probably do not want to be risking guys at this stage of the season. Certainly you want to get guys back to get them acclimated and build chemistry at certain spots, but you do have to be a little more careful in terms of how you handle the load management for players and just having them play through pain, because it's going to be you're hoping to play into the 3rd week in January, and that means you got to preserve guys and keep them from re-injuring or re-aggravating all that.
Well, one thing to keep in mind is that Ohio State practices hard, and presumably Simon and Jackson got hurt in practice somehow. They said they had tough practices this week. Well, with a long season, and this has been the way that Day has run it, and Urban Meyer before him, then they may need to look at cutting back some, at least on the contact in their daily practices, because the last thing you want is them losing somebody in practice.
That's true, but we say that, and who was still playing late into the game against Akron when you're up? I mean, they kept the starters. Was it into the 4th quarter? Was Howard? Yeah. Howard played into the 4th quarter.
The offensive line played even after with Devin Brown in the game.
And I get that, it's the first game, let them play a little more, but it goes against the whole thing of what we just talked about. It's a long season, get them out of there. They didn't get them out of there. And it was hot. I mean, it wasn't 90 degree like it's been earlier in the week, but it wasn't cool. So again, I will die on this hill that Ryan Day is an NFL guy, that in the NFL, you play your starters, and that's just what you do. So, and I think he does it a little bit with that's his little mentality in college.
Bill wants to rest the players during the week and scale back practices. Rob wants them to come out earlier in the games on Saturdays. Does a certain octogenarian former Notre Dame football coach want to chime in response to that?
Well, what I could say about that is this is Lou. Lou says that if you're going to be tough, you got to play the whole game. In fact, I think there should be a 5th quarter, and they play that too.
Oh, I can imagine the emails already.
Rob, is that how he sounded talking to him a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I got hold of Lou. That was about
a long conversation I hear.
About a 35-second conversation that I had to turn into a 800-word column. and I thought it worked out. Lou said that he thinks Ryan Day is a winner and the Buckeyes should be number one. Now he hung up on me before I could ask him if he thinks the Buckeyes are tougher than they used to be. So we don't know that. I mean, and Ryan Day is a winner. Lou Holtz, accurate statement. Ryan Day is now 40-0 against unranked teams. 40-0 against unranked teams, which is the longest streak by a first-time coach in college football history. I think Nick Saban lost a couple early against unranked teams and then won like 70 some in a row. I think Nick Saban has like 70 plus wins in a row against unranked teams. So Ryan Day has a ways to go. But as you guys know, I wrote this earlier, Ryan Day's critics like to push back on that and say, yeah, he doesn't lose the little one, but he struggles to win the big one. So until Michigan, essentially, we'll just kind of table that. We'll table that Oregon. Talk until Michigan.
Oregon counts, and maybe Penn State.
I'm not. It counts and it doesn't. I think.
Michigan's the ultimate one.
Yeah, I mean they're talking about the biggest, which is Georgia in the semifinal. He did beat Clemson. Right, that was a big win, but he lost to Clemson, and he lost to Michigan, and he lost to the national championship game to Alabama. So there's that.
Notre Dame last year, but yeah, you're
the point is toward the end of the season, everything on the line, right? I mean, yeah, we'll table that. We don't need to get into Ryan Day on any hot seat yet.
No, we don't.
Thanks.
All right, I think that pretty much wraps it up, right, guys?
Real quick, can I ask? Just looking around the league, anything jump out at you? I thought USC really looked pretty good. Their defense was improved. I mean, you're playing LSU. It's got a lot of talent. We'll see where that goes. But USC impressed me. Oregon, a little bit of a bump, stumble maybe.
Yeah.
I thought Wisconsin. There's an interesting thing. Western Michigan, Ohio State's opponent this coming week, gave Wisconsin somewhat of a game. Right. Does that mean Western Michigan's pretty good, or is Wisconsin So maybe a little of both. I don't know. I don't know much about Western Michigan, but I would say SC impressed me. Penn State impressed me. Oregon didn't impress me. Wisconsin, who, that they're what they are.
Well, Michigan struggled with Fresno State. Fresno State had the ball down 6 points in the fourth quarter. And then it all kind of went to hell for them. Michigan is a surprise starter at quarterback. What's his name? I can't remember the name.
Started.
Yeah. We all thought it'd be Orji, the guy who played a little bit last year, and it wasn't. He played some, but yeah, that was a surprise. And they were in a struggle. Now, Fresno State's pretty good. I mean, Fresno State's one of those teams that if you don't know about them, and then you find out that they always play tough. They're never intimidated. They have a long history of kind of challenging top teams. So if Ohio State ever were to schedule Fresno State, don't just chalk it up as an easy W.
They have played Fresno State.
Yeah, they might have. I think they did a long time ago. But Oregon really struggled with Idaho, right? Idaho. I mean, that was a real surprise. That was I think a 14-point game. And it was close. It wasn't misleading. It was a close game. So Minnesota's the only Big Ten team to lose.
Yeah. UCLA struggled a little bit against Hawaii. Of course, you know what? I think they won by a touchdown or 10 maybe. But, it's UCLA and you're playing out in, paradise. So it's a little hard to get up for that game maybe.
Joey Cutter comes up.
I tell you, the bottom feeders, the typical bottom feeders in the Big Ten, really, they showed up. I mean, there were 3, I think, shutouts. Purdue, I believe, Illinois, and I can't remember the other one. But it was an impressive showing by teams that aren't expected to do much. Now their competition wasn't much, but maybe all I'm saying is maybe the Big Ten's a little better this year. We'll see.
17-1 first weekend is not too shabby. The Buckeyes were one of those 17 teams to win.
And the Big Ten 1-0 against the new Big Ten 1-0 against the new SEC.
They will be keeping track of those games, and certainly the conference offices out there south of Chicago. That was Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz. I'm Joey Kaufman. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Buckeye Extra Football Podcast, recapping Ohio State's 52-6 win over Akron in Week 1. We'll be back later this week to preview its Week 2 matchup against Western Michigan, which comes to the Horseshoe on Saturday night. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra Podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.